Hi everybody, this recording is for week 6 of the 2013 spring semester of contemporary programming. This lecture will be on the basics of utilizing WinForms as secondary windows or secondary forms, and as well dialog forms. So the ability to set up forms as child forms to your primary or main form, which is kind of the trigger or entry point to your application, or to create additional forms to function as dialog boxes. Now, this lecture is actually going to be broken up into 5 to 10 minute video segments. I'm going to cover a number of different topics, so be sure to watch all the videos in order to get all of the material. So to start off, what we're going to do is set up a new WinForm application. It will have a single module in it, or a single form. And with that, we're going to take that single form, and I'm going to rename it from form 1 to frmmain.cs. You'll get a prompt saying, do you want me to rename everything else? And you'll want to say yes to that. I'm then going to right click on the project, go to add, and go Windows Form. And I'm going to call this FRM child. So we now have an FRM main, which will be our main form, and FRM child, which will be our child form. For FRM main, I'm going to then change the text that appears in the title bar to be main form. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the child form. So this one will be child form, and on the main form we will call it main form. Alright, so we'll take the main form, and what the objective will be here through this lecture is the ability to push content from the main form to the child form and vice versa. So we'll start out by adding a text box to our main form. And we'll add a label for that text box. And then we'll add a button as well. I'm actually going to resize this form, make it a little smaller. It doesn't need to be very big in this case for this example. And the label will say full name. And then this button, we will just have it labeled as submit, giving it the name of btn submit. This text box will be txt full name. Alright, perfect. Now, from this form, we'll type in a full name, we'll hit submit, and then what we'll want to do is we'll want the child form to pop up, and we're going to kind of emulate a message box, but in it will have a label, and we'll call this LBL full name. And then we'll add 2 buttons. And the first one will be btn OK with a text of OK. And then the second button we will call cancel, or it will have a text of cancel, and we'll call it btn cancel. And the label will be LBL full name, and the text will just be blank. So we'll resize this form as well. Okay, great. Now the real work will occur on the submit button's click event. So we'll double click on the button. It'll create a event handler method for us. And what we'll do in this is we will capture and verify the text box value, which is the text property. And basically what I'm saying there is we're going to retrieve the value and make sure that that there is a value in the text box 1, and 2, that it appears to be a full name. And then from there we will create and open the child form. We will pass the name into the form. And then we'll actually probably move the open to this step. Alright, so pretty straightforward. Capture the value, do a little bit of verification, create the child form, pass the name into the form, and then actually display or open the form so that we can see the result. The last and final step that I'd also like to do is then capture back whether the user clicked OK or cancel. Alright. So the first step is to capture and verify. So we'll declare a variable of string full name. We'll set full name equal to txt fullname.text, and then if the string is null or white space, we will just have a message box state full name required, and we'll exit. With having that done, we can then go ahead and declare an instance of our child form. And to do that, we now have a class called frmChild. So if we actually right click on this and we say view code, we have created a class called frmChild, which inherits the form class from the framework. So our class name is frmChild, and we need to create an instance of that form. So to do that, we'll say frmChild, which is the name of the class, child form, which will be our instance variable name, equals new frmChild. Okay? And then we need to pass the value into the child form, and there's a few ways to do that, and I'll cover that in a moment. But then to actually show the form, all we do is say child form dot show, and call the show method on that child form instance, and then that will cause the form to appear. So if we run this real quick, the form will show up. I'll type in a full name, hit submit, and what this will do is it will validate that there's a full name, it will create an instance of the child form, and then show it. And there's our child form. These forms integrate and interact independently of one another, but if we go and close the main form, the child form will be closed automatically. Alright, so the question really is, how do we pass a value from frm main, where this event handler exists, into frmChild, or the child form instance? To do that, we're going to go into the code view again of frmChild, and we're going to take a slightly different approach to what we've done in the past, but I'm going to cover what options we have in terms of getting information or data in and out. So the first option here is that we can have a public string property called full name with a getter and a setter. And with these, we can map them directly or indirectly to the label. And what I mean by mapping is that we actually reference the label text property inside of this property. So it kind of becomes a wrapper around that text property. So what that would look like is we could say the getter of full name will return LBL fullname.text. LBL full name is the actual label that is on our form, and what we're basically saying is take whatever text value that's in that label and return it as the full name property. Inversely, we can say LBL fullname.text equals value. So we'll take whatever value is passed into full name and store it inside of LBL fullname.text. Now this is an oversimplified approach, but it works just the same. And for this case would serve the purpose just fine. The approach I'd like to take, though, is slightly different, and what I'd recommend doing is actually creating a different initializer. So this is a void initializer or constructor for this class. I'm going to change it from being a void constructor into a parameterized constructor. And to do that, we basically take this method and we just put the placeholder in for parameters. In this case, the parameter is going to be a string that is the full name, so we'll say string full name, and then we will allow the initialize components method to run first, and then we'll follow up that method with full name equals full name. Now that can be a little confusing, but remember that casing is important, so things that are capitalized are unique compared to anything that may be in lowercase. So this full name is actually referencing this full name property that we have below, where this full name is referencing this parameter called full name that's part of this constructor. So this line of code will actually take full name, the parameter, and pass it or set the full name property to its value, which then by virtue of the wrapping will actually set the label's text property to this full name. If you need that repeated, rewind, listen again. Hopefully that'll make sense. Alright, so we've changed the constructor of FRM child. We then have to come back to FRM main, and we'll find that we have an exception, an underline, showing for this constructor because we've now changed the constructor signature. It's no longer a void constructor, it now requires a parameter. So to make this a valid line of code, we will just put full name in here, and that will then set the full name label on the child form. Additionally, we could come in here and say child form dot full name equals full name. Now again, this looks a little redundant, maybe a little confusing, but this full name on the left is referencing the property of the child form. Full name on the right is in reference to this private variable, or this internal variable to this event handler, that is currently holding the value of the full name text box.text. So what is happening is that we are actually taking the txt full name.text, storing it in this local variable called full name. We're then taking full name, the local variable, and setting the full name property of the child form equal to that value. Now some of you may be looking at this and going, that seems kind of redundant, and it is. This line of code is really not necessary because this constructor is serving the exact same purpose. If we continued with the void constructor, then we could use this line of code to set the full name with the void constructor. So you can use either or in this situation. Both are valid, both are functional. For consistency and almost insurance that you do pass a full name in, I recommend the constructor method because you cannot create an instance of the child form without passing in a full name. Okay, so we'll go ahead and we'll recompile. We get our form. If we hit submit, we'll get full name required, validation. So I'll type my name again and hit submit. Perfect. So the form comes up, shows my name transferred from this text box to this form. We're able to pass that information back and forth in that sense, passing from the main form to the child form. These buttons don't have any events on them yet, so we'll have to do that in our next video. And then we'll also work on how to capture those click events and then get that information back to the main form. Thanks.